Hi, my name is Peter Kofiata, quarter in 2017 as an artist on for the Scotia question. In this webinar, we're going to discuss about one of the bordering issues in that is of most concern to Scotia as well. Today, since we came in the final report. Now, this is going to be the content of this discussion. We will discuss what plagiarism is, plagiarism, the bordering questions. We also talk about it, and the punishment for plagiarism will be related to academic setting and punishment for this act. Use and the domain. How plagiarism can be prevented. I will also highlight on what teams need to do when submitting final report and report drafts. So this is basically what we are going to, and to begin with, one of the main academic writing. We engaging people in class and incorporate them into our writing. But the worst is the source of the content used. And Scotia, like students working to generate a feasible and solid result to a real life problem faced by clients. Members to have an idea about plagiarism is so they can avoid any possible cause of it. On the www.com could be able and for their draft, of course, anything provided a facility provided for the end for them to sign their drafts, and then anything because the students some of their content has not. And in this webinar, what will be the most contributor? One of students need to send a report draft through 1018 Scotia, and that's the students. Yeah. I've already indicated the topic for this discussion is plagiarism. So one will ask opinion and this work. Serious way of was the borrowing term that is obviously in place of plagiarism and the offense. Discuss with you what's an online definition. According to the Merriam-Webster online dictionary, means any of the is trying to let us be aware of. To prevent an original, an idea, or product derived from an existing sources. In other words, you are not trying to credit the sources of that idea to or to the original owner. And when this happens, then you have plagiarized. In other words, plagiarism is an act of fraud. It's a serious fraud. It involves both stealing someone else's work and trying to lie about it afterwards. And so the question that we can ask is, can words and ideas really be stolen? Yes, is the answer. The answer is yes, words and ideas can be stolen. Now, according to the US laws and other laws in other countries, the expression of original idea is considered intellectual property and is protected by copyright laws, just like original inventions. Almost all forms of expression fall under copyright protection as long as they are recorded in some form of media, just like a book and computer files or any other form of media. Now, in this context, all of these acts that I'm going to mention constitutes plagiarism. First, turning in someone else's work as your own is considered plagiarism. And the other is copying words or ideas from someone else without giving credit. So if you copy an idea from someone without giving credit, it's considered plagiarism. And the other one is failing to put a quotation in quotation marks. You will probably quote from someone else, but you will fail to put them in quotation marks. It's still liable to plagiarism. Another form is changing words but copying the sentence structure of a source without giving credit to the source. It's also considered plagiarism. And copying so many words or ideas from a source so much that it makes up the majority of your work, whether you give credit or not, is also considered as an issue of plagiarism. And so, something interesting that we should note here, changing the words of an idea or sources is not sufficient to prevent plagiarism. If you have retained the essential idea of an original source and have not cited it, then no matter how you may have altered its content or presentation, you have still plagiarized. And so most cases of plagiarism can be avoided, however, by citing the sources. So if you are able to cite the sources, then you will be safe from plagiarism. Simply acknowledging that certain materials have been borrowed and providing your clients with the information necessary to find that sources is usually enough to prevent plagiarism. So in this case, global virtual teams working to develop their report, a very conclusive and feasible report. In fact, an innovative report that can read the impression of their clients need to take note of this. So in simply put, plagiarism is the use of another's original words or ideas as though they were your own. That is the simple definition we can give to plagiarism here. Anytime you borrow from an original source and do not give proper credit, you have committed plagiarism and violated the copyright laws. And so, uh, in the next, in few minutes, I will highlight on what copyright laws are to this effect. And let's look at the types of plagiarism that we have. For the purpose of this discussion, uh, we are looking at two types of plagiarism. And we are looking at plagiarism related to the source not cited as one type, and plagiarism related to the source cited, but still it is considered plagiarism. And all these forms happens in several instances, and I'm going to discuss them. And yes, the first instance that I'm going to talk about is related to sources not cited. Sources not cited. So in this case, we can call it sources plagiarism related to sources not cited. Now, this can take several forms. One way is to turn in another's work word for word. as if it is your own. Another form is to copy significant portion of text straight from a single source without alteration. And another form can also be uh, that you have retained the essential contents of the sources by changing keywords and phrases, but you are still liable to plagiarize because you have not cited the sources or probably not been able to put the content in quotation mark. There are several of them, and but for the purpose of this discussion, let's note these key ideas. This plagiarism is related to the fact that you are failed to cite the sources, the content used. And the next type of plagiarism is related to the sources cited, but still you have plagiarized. And this can also take several forms. In this case, you can mention an author's name for a source, but neglect to include specific information on the location of the material reference. When this happens, you are still able to plagiarize. And another instance for this source when when you can provide information regarding the sources, but the information is inaccurate. Yes, you have actually provided information, but it may not be accurate information. That will help anyone having your material to be able to track or the source of that information. And when this happens, is you have plagiarized. Again, you could cite a source, but neglect to put in quotation marks on text that has been copied word for word. And when this happens, you have also plagiarized. Although you are attributing the basic ideas to the source, but the understanding is that you are falsely claiming original presentation or interpretation of the information, and it's still plagiarism. And yes, there are several forms of this kind too, but the keywords are the sources are cited, but not in proper manner. And I stated earlier that plagiarism is a violation of copyright laws, but the question is, what are copyright laws? Copyright laws exist to protect our intellectual property. In other words, any original work that is created, like inventions, like any other form of literary work that is created by the original owner, is what copyright, what is called intellectual property, and what that is what copyright laws protect. They make it legal to reproduce someone else's expression of ideas or information without permission. And this can include music, images, written words, videos, and a variety of other media. Anyone who will produce copyright materials improperly can be prosecuted in a court of law. It does not matter if the form or content of the original work has been altered. As long as any material can be shown to be substantially similar to original, it may be considered a violation of Copyright Act. And what are some of the questions or burning questions when it comes to copyright laws? I'm going to address some few of them. Are all published works copyrighted? This is the first question I want us to take a look at. Are all public works copyrighted? The answer is no. Not all published works are copyrighted. Yes, we have published works that are not copyrighted. And so it is not all published works that are copyrighted. The Copyright Act only protects works that express original ideas or information. For example, you could borrow library from the following that I'm going to mention without uh, being accused of violation of copyright laws. And in actual fact, you have no fear of plagiarism. The first is compilation of readily available information, such as phone book. And the next is works published by governments. You can use any other work that is published by the government without any fear of plagiarism. And fact that are not the result of original research is also widely known. And when you use those facts, it is not considered a plagiarism. Works in the public domain. And later I will discuss about what public domain is. When you use works in the public domain, it is also considered free from plagiarism. And the next question I'm going to address is, can facts be copyrighted? Yes. In some situations, any fact that has been published as a result of individual research are considered the intellectual property of the author or the original owner. So in this case, 1018.com provide the platform to check this so that so that is why S-Quarter expects the final work to be submitted through 1018.com. And this could help the students working in global virtual team to be able to track the sources of every information they copied from internet or from books or from whatever source. And in effect, will help them to avoid plagiarism. Now, the next question is, do you have to cite sources for every fact that you use? You have to cite sources for every fact that you use? The answer is no. You do not have to cite sources for facts that are not the result of a unique individual research. Available from numerous sources and generally known to the public are considered common knowledge. So in this case, those facts are well known. Everybody knows about it. And so it is considered a common knowledge. So you can use them without any fear of plagiarism. You can also use this fact library in your paper without citing authors. If you are unsure whether or not a fact is common knowledge, then you should probably cite your sources just to be safe from plagiarism. And the next question is, does it also matter how much was copied? Not in determining whether or not plagiarism is a crime. If even the smallest part of work is found to have been plagiarized, it is still considered a copyright violation, and its producer can be brought to trial. But however, the amount that was copied probably will have a bearing on the severity of the sentence. So a work that is almost entirely plagiarized will almost certainly incur greater penalties than work that only include a small amount of plagiarized materials. So it is important for global virtual teams to take note of this. And one question that we can ask also is, can I cite can I cite uh, references for all materials used? Yes, you are allowed to borrow ideas or phrases from other sources, provided you cite them properly and your usage in content is consistent with the guidelines set by fair use laws. And as a rule, fair use laws, however, allow people to cite so that's to plagiarism. So as a rule, however, you should be careful about borrowing too liberally. If the case can be made that your work consists predominantly of someone else's words or ideas, you may still be susceptible to charges of plagiarism. Sorry. Uh, so, to this end, you are beginning to think that plagiarism is a crime, so you would want to ask, what are the punishments for plagiarism? Generally, plagiarism has some punishment, but it depends on the settings that it occurs. For instance, in academic setting, in academic settings, we should have academic punishment, and we could have academic punishment. And here, plagiarism is handled by individual instructors and the academic institutions involved. And in fact, most colleges and universities have zero tolerance for plagiarism. So they don't tolerate plagiarism at all. So in this case, they will not allow it at all to happen. And in such cases, academic standards of intellectual honesty are often more demanding than government copyright laws. So those institutions who do not tolerate plagiarism will probably set up their laws on academic or intellectual honesty when it comes to the issue of plagiarism. And when plagiarism occurs, it could result in failure for assignments or can even result in expulsion. So that is how it works. And we can also have legal punishment where plagiarism are considered misdemeanors and is punishable by fines, and it can even end up it can even result into a 1 year in jail if you plagiarize, and that is into an academic punishment. Sorry, a legal punishment for plagiarism. Final punishments that we can have as a result of the setting of where plagiarism occurs is related to the corporate world. Most institutions and corporations will not tolerate any form of plagiarism. And in fact, there are instances where people have lost their jobs or been denied positions as a result of plagiarism. And this is considered as an institutional punishment. So in some institutions, when you plagiarize, you are likely to be laid off from work. So you can also ask, uh, so basically this is the punishment that one is going to face when you plagiarize. And one is related to the academic settings and the other to the legal, is related to legal punishment, and the final one is in the corporate world, where plagiarism could also be considered as a crime. Now, does intention matter at all? Yes, intention matters in plagiarism. So when it comes to the issue of plagiarism, ignorance of the law is never an excuse. So even if you did not realize you were plagiarizing, you may still be found guilty of plagiarism. Now, In I said earlier that there's something we call fair use. And so, what is fair use? Now, the United States government has established rough guidelines for determining the nature and amount of wealth that may be borrowed without explicit written consent. I don't know how the other countries are also uh, relating or trying to uh, guide on this, but what I know is that of the United States government on plagiarism, and that is related to fair use. These are called fair use laws. Those, and I mean the guidelines that are set by the United States government are called fair use laws, because they try to establish whether certain uses of original materials are reasonable or not. I'm going to discuss some of the rubrics you can apply to help determine the fair use, the fairness of any given use. And the first is, sorry, uh, so the first is uh, the nature of use. The nature of use. If you have merely copied something, it is unlikely to be considered fair use. But if the material has been transformed in any original way through interpretation, analysis, etc., it is more likely to be considered fair use. And then also the second is the amount you have used. The more you have borrowed, the less likely it is to be considered fair use. So in this case, you should be concerned about what percentage of your work is a borrowed material. You should also be concerned about what percentage of the original work did you use. And here, the most important thing is the lower, the better. So the lower the material that you use, the better. What fair use is. And the final to highlight on the issue of fair use is the effects of your use on the original. If you are creating a work that competes with the original in its own market and may do the original author some economic harm, any substantial borrowing is unlikely to be considered fair use. So here, the more the contents of your work or its target audience differs from that of the original work, the better you can be saved from plagiarizing. And one interesting topic that comes to the fore when the issue of plagiarism is raised is the public domain. So now, what is the public domain? Works that are no longer protected by copyright or never have been are considered public domain. This means that you may freely borrow materials from these works without fear of plagiarism, provided you make proper attribution to the owner. And the question is, how do I know if something is public domain or not? Uh, the terms and conditions under which works enter the public domain are a bit complicated, and it is important to take note here. In general, anything published more than 75 years ago is now in the public domain, and that is by law. Works published after 1978 are protected for are protected for the lifetime of the author plus 70 years. Yes, plus 70 years. So the lifetime of the author plus 70 years is what is used to determine work that is in the public domain. And these are works that are produced by the original authors. The laws govern works published fewer than 75 years ago, but before 1978, they are more complicated to determine whether it is a public domain, it is in the public domain or not, or whether it is being protected by copyright laws or not. So it is actually complicated to determine works that are in the public domain. So in this case, the most important thing to think of is uh, try to cite references or sources of your work when you are working on your project, especially in global virtual teams. Now, I'm going to discuss about citation that has been uh, one sure way to prevent plagiarism. So, to prevent plagiarism, yes, it is, of course, important to cite citation. And one would ask, what at all is citation? Citation can be anything at all. Maybe it could be in the form of references or putting items in quotation. Critical, and to be very specific here, trying to cite the sources of every work that is used. Now, one would ask, what is citation? A citation is the way you tell your readers that certain materials in your work came from another source. It also gives your readers the information necessary to find that sources. And some of the information that is necessary to track using citation include information about the author, the title of the work, the name and location of the company that's published the copy of the source, and the date the copy was published, and the page number of the materials you are borrowing. And the question is, you can. The question is, why should I cite sources at all when I'm working in any academic material of any nature? And of course, that's the report, the report or the proposal of GTB members in Esquire is not an exception. Now you are citing sources for every materials used or the contents used for your work for two main reasons. The first one is to give credit to the original author. Yes, you cite sources to give credit to the original author. And the second is that citing sources is the only way to use other people's work without plagiarizing. By the Lamont, for instance, citations are extremely helpful to anyone who wants to find out more about your ideas and where they came from. So not all sources are good. Your own ideas may be more accurate or even more interesting than those of your sources. So proper citation will give you a cover from someone else's bad ideas. So it is necessary to cite sources. And again, citing sources shows the amount of research you have done. For instance, in doing research and in also uh, uh, developing a proposer in global virtual teams, you will be reading a lot from the internet and from several sources. So citing sources will prove that the team is actually working and researching to get the necessary information needed to complete the proposal to be able to meet their client's need. So citing sources strengthen your work by lending outside support to your ideas. And another question that is of most important is, does citing sources make your work seem less original? The answer is no. Citing sources can never make your work seem less original. Not at all. On the contrary, citing sources actually help your readers distinguish your ideas from those of your sources. So this will actually emphasize the originality of your work, and that will be enough for you to be able to do a very proper work and develop a very good proposal for your clients. The next question that of course I'm going to address is, when do I need to cite sources? To cite sources for every content or materials used. Now, whenever you borrow words or ideas, you need to acknowledge their sources. The following situations may require citations, and I'm going to mention some quite few of them. First, when you use quotes from other people, you must cite sources. And also, whenever you paraphrase, you must cite sources. Idea that someone else has already expressed, you must cite sources. And whenever you make specific reference to the work of another, you must cite sources. And whenever someone else's work has been critical in developing your own ideas, you must cite sources. For GVT members developing their business proposal for this year, you are going to depend on others' work from different sources to be able to develop a very comprehensive report that meets the standard of the client, and that is so feasible and solid enough to part of the top 10 that Escorter is looking for. So you should be able to cite sources for all. Now, citing sources depends on what type of work you are writing, how you are using the borrowed materials, and the expectations of your instructor. And in this case, Escorter expect all their students working in global virtual teams to cite sources for whatever information they used. Now, the question is, how can GVT members avoid plagiarism? How can students working in a global virtual teams trying to develop a very feasible, comprehensive, and a solid report to a company seeking to address their needs through Escorter, how can those students working in this regard avoid plagiarism? And that is what I'm going to discuss here. Plagiarism is using others' ideas and words without using the source of that information. To avoid plagiarism, you must give credit in the following cases that I'm going to mention. First, whenever you use another person's idea or opinion or theory, you must cite sources. If you fail to cite sources, then you are plagiarizing. So citing sources in this case will help you to avoid plagiarism. Second, whenever you use any fact, statistics, graphs, drawings, any pieces of information that are not common knowledge, you should cite sources. If you do not cite sources for this, then you are liable to plagiarize. So all team members who are cited sources for the facts, statistics, and graphics that they have used in their report are free from plagiarism. And then the next one is, you must also use quotations for another person's actual spoken or written words. So quotation marks is necessary to avoid plagiarism. So whenever you have been able to use another person's idea in quotations, then you are to cite sources for them. And when you cite sources, you are free from plagiarizing. And then also you must also paraphrase another person's spoken or written words. When you paraphrase another person's spoken or written words, you are avoiding plagiarism. And you should also properly cite references for every materials used. Yes, it is very important, very significant in S culture. And so, S culture will be particular about references. When you cite references for every content or materials used, then you are free from plagiarizing. And Esquatter will be glad to see your references. So this is a credit to all students working in global virtual teams, and in fact, those who are developing their final report. You should be you should have referencing at the back of your mind that any information that you are using, you are citing referencing, you are citing sources for them. And if you don't, Turnitin will help you to identify them. So finally, what are S-Culture experts from Global Virtual Team when it comes to the issue of plagiarism? To ensure that team members' reports are free from plagiarism, S-Culture expects the report draft and the final report document to be submitted via www.turnitin.com. And there are instructions as to how to submit the report draft and the final report, and I'm going to uh, discuss them and probably show them to the global virtual team members who are in the process of developing their final reports and submitting them. And some of the key issues that team members should note here is that only one team member must submit the documents on behalf of the entire team. So yes, it's only and the team leader can do this. And the team member who will be submitting the drafts and final reports must follow the instructions as follows. Are required to read the last part so in the team where S Culture has provided all the necessary instructions and guidelines to complete the submission through of the final reports and the report draft to turn it in. And in fact, this is one of the demanding requirements from students working in global virtual teams. So it will not be a good it will not be in good notes for students to ignore this. And uh, it is also important for the global virtual team members to know that the draft and the final reports have different class IDs. Yes, they have different class IDs, and all can be found at the last page of the challenge instructions. I think the last couple of the last two pages of challenge instructions will can go to some of this they need to know. Team member submitting the report certain to select drafts for the report draft and final reports for the final. So this particular instruction is very necessary. The team can refer to the challenge this, and then before I conclude from this webinar, I'm going to highlight on some of, especially some of the guidelines right from challenge for the students to take. Conclusion to this discussion for GVT members to be a high quality report, enough to be part of the top 10 reports and also meet their clients' very need. They should have zero tolerance for plagiarism. And the actual fact, they should know more about plagiarism and cite sources and references for every article that is used. Now, this brings us officially to the end of our discussion, and uh, I'm going to give us some time, but before I give us some time to final parts of the client instruction and students things they need to their final report. This is a very important escorter. So this is it, submission guidelines. Now the report draft and the final report documents must be submitted via .1018.com. And I'm sure by now in their report draft and gone through this, bring this to their notice, reference it, or read it, and probably to get more idea about what they need to do. And that is how it goes. That only one team member must submit the document on behalf of the team, and the team member who will be submitting the draft and the final report must follow these steps. And these are the steps that the student should take note of. And it is actually grouped into two parts. And then the first part is this. The student should create the particular student in the team who is submitting the report draft or the final report on behalf of the team to create a Turnitin account. And this does not require much time. Is that it requires 60 to 90 seconds. And then on www.1018.com, the student needs to click on the link, create account. When you click on create account, of course, there will be some pop-up to the creating of the account, and students will need to follow. And is that on the next window under the create a new account heading, students should click on student link and enter the class ID. And they should know that the draft and the final report submissions have different class IDs. And to this one, this is the class ID that is shown here. And we also have the password that is going to be of interest. And here the password is escorter. And also, the students should note that already those who have 1018 accounts will simply not need any new account for 1018. They should log on using their old login information and then click on enroll in class and then tap on the top and repeat the step 3. That is this step here. So this is what we are talking about here. And then the part 2 is the submitting the paper. Now, and this requires about 60 to 120 seconds. And these are the steps that need to be followed. And he said once the account is created, you log in into your account, your homepage will list your classes, and then it says select the correct class and click on the submit button. And here, make certain to select draft the report draft, and this is what I indicated earlier, and then the final report for the final. So the student take note and to easily submit your assignment so conveniently. and for to be able to whatever report this back to the step 6. It said choose single file upload. Setting the file name, team number. And that the file name only contain your team number. This is that it is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is also wrong. Is bring their team number. If the team is in a student pool, the student should click to locate the to your computer. When you click on save, you are going to view where you can select file from the computer, and then click on file, click on upload button and then open full, and then the students when submit to confirm their submission. Guys, you will see on top of the page a few hours you will see your original report that shows how much and what part of your report have been plagiarized. So working in global virtual team plagiarism. This brings us to the question once again. I'm looking forward for working for this year's S-Quarter program to find useful this discussion about plagiarism. In fact, plagiarism is a very interesting. It's one of the serious cases when it report writing, and this will be useful in them to plagiarism. And in fact, when students are able to cite sources for and reference every document or every content they have used in their report, it will be very important for the for escorter and for their client to be able to know the originality of their work and what they to be proud of. And this is very key is for students in global virtual teams to offset, and that's plagiarism. It's the greatest concern to everyone in academic institutions, and students need to offset it. So I'm looking forward to see you, the students this year, working in global virtual team to find this webinar useful and try to offset it. And this webinar is not only going to be useful for the current students working in the global virtual team, but in future it will provide some kind of benefit for students who are yet to come in, and it's going to help them to actually guide their thoughts, their content answered. So anyone else can ask questions. It's quite unfortunate I'm not seeing anyone joining me here, and so anyone can ask a question. Okay, question. This is live and to be able to ask questions. Address is a function of plagiarism, and we'll be able to guide them through. So, all right. Any further question? I will say thank you for your time, and if you have any other concerns, hoping to address them via comments to this video and emails. you can comment or anything that is worrying to official escorter, and then address those concerns. So to this end, all the students working government watching for this year, or the best in those coming, and best because I know that you're going to work through all this and try to reference site sources for the reports that you have already written, and follow closely the instructions outlined in the uh, challenge instruction to be able to submit your work peacefully and soundly, so that Escorter will be proud of you, and you will also be proud of yourself about how very conclusive and neat. So I say thank you for joining me here. My name is Peter Kofi Arthur once again, and I'm from Ghana, and I'm a coach in Escorter. And uh, as part of the requirement, this is what I was able to bring to the notice of everyone. And I thank you for having time for this video. In fact, this will be useful to you and will be useful to everybody in future. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you. And thank you to me.